we are going to dive into this project. The first thing I'm going to talk about is our tools, get stuff out a little bit here. So you need a work surface, okay? I use a little cup like this to put my clay under while I'm working. So what I do is, you've got two bottles in front of you, classroom. One is release agent, the other is water, okay? Put a little mist of water in there, put that upside down on your work surface. You might want to have your roller out. You probably won't use it much. We might just roll our clay to kind of get it working a little bit. If you like using snake rollers versus your hand, you're going to use this clear snake roller, okay? You're going to want the clay scraper to cut the ends of the snake off, right? The other thing that I really like to use for this is the rubber tip sculptor tools. That's how I join my ends together. You're going to want a paintbrush for connecting the wet parts. I like this angled one. It's a little stiffer. It helps you move more clay. You do want the metal brush, the metal handle brush. That's to apply release agent to your texture. And your depth gauges. We'll use the depth gauges for judging our thickness of our piece. I'll show you a couple tricks to do that. Get the red ones and the pink ones out. That's going to be kind of the minimum depth, and I'll show you some tricks to, if you like the chunkier piece versus the thinner pieces. The first thing that you're going to do is actually combine your clay, okay? So if you open up your clay, you'll find the little vacuum things inside, and see, if you touch it, you'll see what I mean. They're firm. They're very firm. So open both of those up. We're going to combine them because we're going to need to cut that into thirds. So we're going to actually roll those together. You've got a scalpel in your kit to cut the bags open if you want, but there's also a little tear notch on them. When I combine the clays, I kind of take the ends and roll them into the middle. That gets everything even and hydrated nicely. Okay, so once I have my clay combined, I'm going to cut it into thirds. That's going to ensure I have similar size pieces. Doesn't have to be exact. You just don't want to use too much clay making one and not have enough to make the others, right? The next thing that we're going to do is find a deep texture. I'm going to do something different on this one. I'm going to use this. I'm suggesting a deep texture for a reason. We are going to roll our snake rolls, and then we're going to hand roll them on this texture to put texture onto the snake roll. But then we got to link them together. And when we do that, our fat little fingers are going to push down all that texture. You're going to have a tendency to be mushing it, right? So start with a deep texture so that you have something left by the time you stop handling it, right? And you're not going to worry about a pattern so much, because as you put this thing together, you'll lose that pattern. You won't really, like, don't try to do something perfectly symmetrical, because that's never going to come out that way. I tend to go with kind of an organic thing, even if you just did dots or lines, wavy things, anything like that works great. You can see down on that bottom part right here, that gives you a good idea of the kind of texture you'll see. It's not going to be super defined. It's just going to have texture on it. So you can go ahead and put some release agent on your texture so that that's ready. And don't worry, by the time you get there, you'll have your textures. This first part takes a few minutes. I'm going to take my depth gauges. I've got a 2 millimeter and a 1.5. So I'm up to 3.5. That's going to be a pretty thin roll. If you look at that. That's about that size. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this, so you can decide whichever you'd like. This will be the thinner way, and then I'll show you the thicker way. I'm going to take my clay, make sure it's in great condition. Take my snake roller, and I used that whole, that 1/3 chunk of that clay to do that, because I want plenty of space and length and thickness. So now I've got the snake roll. It's roughly that depth. This is not precise. It doesn't need to be, because you're going to put it over here and you're going to mess with it with your fingers. But it just needs to be a nice conditioned snake roll. Then you're going to put it on your texture. Take your fingers and you go back and forth like that with your snake roll. Back and forth, and move each time. Anywhere it doesn't look right, just go back, push down again. Again, this is the reason that that does not need to be perfect and precise. Everybody needs a circle template. There you go. The internet's, yeah, our signal's not coming in as well. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is cut our first circle. I used the 1 inch. Okay. So the way that I did this, I cut the end off, wrap it in there. I'm going to find my cutter. There it is. I'm going to cut at my angle. Take off those extra pieces, and now those should meet up. Okay. Wrap it in there. Gonna cut at my angle, take off those extra pieces, and now those should meet up. You need to join these 2 pieces. To join the pieces, you're just gonna use water on this, and then we're going to use the rubber tip sculptor to blend the 2 pieces together. So put a little water in there, use your paintbrush, add water to the end of that piece so it gets nice and soft, okay? Then use the rubber tip sculptor, important step. Use the rubber tip sculptor to pull clay from one end to the next. So the key is you really need to connect them and make them one piece, not 2 pieces stuck together. You want 1 piece of clay. So get this thing nice and gooey so that you can move clay from one side to the other side. This is called cross-hatching. What you're really doing is, instead of it just being 2 pieces that are kind of glued together on the end, you make it 1 piece of clay by bringing the clay from one to the other. Once you've got that top side done, you flip it over, do the bottom side. Don't worry about keeping your circle 2 circle shaped until you're done with this part, because this is the important part. If this isn't connected well, it can come apart during firing, and you don't want that. I've got mine connected pretty well now. Now my last step is I'm going to go back in here and kind of re-texture that area so that it matches the rest of my piece. Decorate that a bit. Last step after you've got the texture back on is get it into its nice little circle shape. Fix anything that looks funky spot over here. There we go. And then you're going to dry. So I'm going to tell you then how to do the next thing. Okay? Because now as I start doing different things, I need you guys to be able to keep working. After that one dries, you're going to make another one. And this one, you're going to loop inside that one before you make the connection, right?
Makes a chain link.
Exactly, like you're making a chain. Make sense?
So we should wait for this one to be dry.
It doesn't have to be all the way dry,
No,
but it needs
dry
to
enough
be
that it's not
firm. Exactly. The concept that you're doing is you're going to make a ring let it be firm enough that you can work with it. And then you're gonna make another ring on top of that one and leave them like this. Let those dry. I told you I would show you another way to roll a snake roll thick like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna do that. I use the ends of my paintbrush for my gauges. That gets a really thick piece. Now, they can tend to roll around and stuff, and sometimes it's finicky. That's why I didn't show you that first. But I'll show you one real quick so you get the idea. Just like that, okay? And that way you get these really thick ones without having to stack up a million gauges, right? Because sometimes, you know, the more gauges you stack up, the worse it becomes and it's all wonky and stuff. So if you want something really thick, all you got to do is use just a thicker tool that you have, right? Lay those along the side, use those as your gauges. So I am going to work on my next roll. When I connect this guy, I have to connect him inside here. So I just kind of pull that one out of the way. Get this one laid in place. Just kind of tacked it together with my fingers real quick. Get it gooey. I kind of like to let that set there for a second, that water, so that it really absorbs that clay, right? And gets gooey so that I can pull that clay back and forth. Again, this is the crosshatch technique. Pulling clay from one side to the other side and then blending it together. Clean it up, get a little more texture in some of those spots. And then I told you there was a particular way to lay this one when you dry it. Are you ready? Okay, so when you dry this one, this is where my seam is. I don't want to put that under there because that kind of, you know, will kink it and it could create that crack, right? So this piece is going to stay further away over here. Then I get my circle and then I dry just like that. So that third piece, everybody knows how to make the third one, right? Roll it, connect it in between the two. And then after that's dry, then we find a way to lay it. What I mean by that is it fits together. You know, you can spin each piece around 20 different ways, you know. What you are looking for is a nice triangle where they just nest together nicely. That's what you end up looking for. And once you find that, then you're going to use paste and stick them together. Here's what would happen. Both links would just fall down unless you hook through it somehow to hook it up. So once you have your three in a nest, then you use paste to connect them together, reset it again, and then we start putting bales on. I'm going to do my third rings. One inch. Lay it in there. I find like my good spots, you know, whatever areas I think are the prettiest. Overlap it, cut it at an angle. And then those angles will meet. This is the link into the other links. Yes. Take my roll, put it between both of those. Okay, like that, right? Again, you're gonna find a way to lay the seam flat. That's the part you want to keep flat, okay?
The seam on the final one.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. So I finally got it to kind of lay so that I can make the joint. Get it nice and gooey. And the thing that I talked about when doing these joins is I let that water get in there so that you get the clay really mushy. Then I do a crosshatch and pull the clay from one to the other, back and forth, okay? So, you see me kind of letting that set a little bit. That is the goal. Let that set up. Crosshatch that back and forth. See it? Yeah. See how I'm pulling that clay? Not trying to keep it pretty. I'm trying to connect it. Put over. Side. I basically make them one piece of clay instead of two pieces just stuck, Once I've done that all the way, then I'll go in, kind of add some texture, get the texture even around it. Flip it back over. And now I'm gonna make it a circle again. That's the last hard one to do. When you do that third one, don't forget to make it a circle before you put it up there to dry. So you get that last join, and remember, it's tough, So you get that last join, get it to lay down in a good way so that it can be a circle when it dries. And that is that. Now I'm going to put this up on the dryer real quick. I am going to start talking about how to make some of the connections, do the veil, that kind of stuff. And it's basically the finish work of the piece. So what we're going to do is make the connection, make the nest that I was talking about, connect the pieces together, and then make the bail and the bottom loop, okay? Your bail and your bottom loop, you could do this any way you want to, okay? So as I'm talking, you can kind of think through what you want to do with it. Now, you've got water paste in front of you, okay? You could make your own paste for doing this. You don't need to use special water paste for this, okay? I'm going to use it because we have it. So I'm going to have a little bit of water handy. My brush needs to be just a little bit damp, just so that it's kind of sticky, I guess is the best way to explain it, okay? And now I'm going to take my little trio here and figure out, oh my gosh, there it went. See that? When it nests perfectly, it just nests perfectly, okay? It might take you 5 minutes. It might do it the second you pick it up, like it just did that for me. I kind of don't want to move it because I'm really happy with it right now. But I will, to show you that you can find it again, okay? It's just like playing with a puzzle. You just find that right This is also the time if you've got any of those like little cracky edges on a snake roll area or something like that. This is the time to fill that in with paste. Anything you see that you don't like. You can do this as much or as little as you want. Now, bail. And I'm gonna have to kind of wing this a little bit because it's not dry. So the next thing that you're gonna do after that dries, I want to get that piece out of there. The next thing that you're going to do is a bail. Okay, so I'm going to show you where the bail is. On this piece, it looked best for me to have this point at the top, which is where the bail would be, and then a loop between this piece and this piece. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit there. Okay, so you can see that connection is actually between the front loop and the back loop. Not really straight across. It's just twisted. So we've got 3 rings, right? And when you turn them sideways, you can see that this bottom connection, this bottom loop, we're gonna call it, connects from the front piece to the back piece. So your piece is from the side, it's not flat. That's the challenge, right? These things are at angles, okay? So that bottom loop to connect those chains on is actually from the top ring to the bottom ring. So the bail is going to be on this ring primarily. If you turn it onto the back, it connects from the top ring to the ring under it. You can make any kind of bail you would like. You can make any kind of loop connection on the bottom that you would like. If you want to do a bail around a straw, like a flat one with a texture on it. If you want to do a perfect circular tube on the bottom to hang the chains from, you are welcome to make any kind you like. That's what I made for this. So the first thing I have to do is figure out how I'm hanging it. I'm hanging mine this way. This is my bail up here. My loop's gonna be down here. Make a little snake roll. And for my bail, I'm gonna give, I'm gonna call that 5 millimeters thick. I'm gonna give it a little bit of strength, okay? Because it's gonna hold all this chain under it for mine. And again, you don't have to do this exact design. You can use it for all kinds of things. I'm using a guide. So I use that instead of a coffee straw to wrap my bail around to keep the dimension because it's light and it's not gonna like fall off the back of my piece, or I'm not gonna hit it accidentally and snap the bail right off the back of the piece while it's drying. That's the top. Okay, so my bail is gonna go from here to here. Water. Get that clay to open up just a little bit. And I'm gonna take that thing, put it on top of there, set it right down in there, and just use my fingers to gently press that into place for a second. So it stays in shape, basically, right? Then cut it. So I don't have all this extra overhang, right? I'm tapping it into place.
And this is gonna be the front, this is the front, right?
No, this is the back. This is the bail. The bail on the back, right? Okay. So now I've kind of got it laying down where I want it to lay. And now I'm gonna blend that bail. This one's a little harder to see and I can't pick it up. So I'm blending that bail into that piece. Oops. Blending it onto the back piece. And then after I get that thing blended, I'm gonna let it dry. Oh, make sure it's straight then, because this thing has so many odd angles that your eye will start thinking that the bail is supposed to be going this way. And then when you look at it straight down, you're like, oh, wait, no, it doesn't do that. So look at it a couple times before you let it set up. You'll see that mine's crooked. Okay. Try to straighten it out. There we go. And I'm going to let that dry. We're going to fire this differently than a lot of the pieces that I tend to fire. A lot of times I use fiber blanket, or I just put it on the shelf. This particular piece I'm going to use vermiculite for, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. You could use fiber blanket. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little harder to get into the dimensions that you want it to be in. Silica sand, you could use that, okay? You could fire it flat. It shouldn't slump too much, but it'll slump a little bit. This is vermiculite, which comes in a big bag at the garden store. It's not fancy. So I'm just laying this in there. It doesn't have to really have any particular depth to it at all. It has nothing to do with the firing aspect. All it's doing is supporting. I'm going to lay the piece in here, and I don't want to like wedge it or pack it into this. The idea is just so that the vermiculite is under, those rings, as you noticed, they're at angles. Instead of laying flat onto the table, they're going to lay up. So what you got to do is you want to have support under those so that they don't slump down, because it's really cool to have all that dimension. I'm going to lay it in the vermiculite and just kind of nest it. That's the best way I can explain it. Nest it a little bit, and then do you see how much this one is sticking up? I can put my finger all the way under that one. That's where I'm just going to fill that in a little bit. Okay? You don't want to pack this center tight with vermiculite because it can't shrink. The vermiculite will compress just a little bit, but not much. So you don't want to stop the piece from shrinking. You just want to nest up under those rings to keep them from slumping down. Okay? So that's how you're going to fire it. Now, the pan, we had a question about whether or not you could use a ceramic pan. You absolutely can. I don't teach with them because I can't take them in and out of the kiln while they're hot. They will shatter, right? So I teach with the metal pans because I can take this in, put another one in, just pop them in and out of there. I don't need to worry about it, okay? That's why I teach with these. The vermiculite is what I chose to support the rings. You could use lots of different things. You can use fiber blanket, right? But with this many pieces, I was going to be having to like rip little pieces of blanket to try to get under the rings, you know, and have a whole bunch of it out. You can use the silica sand. That would work just fine instead of vermiculite. I am going to get these popped into the kiln. When they're out, we're going to polish. Our kiln just went off, which is the good news. So I'll go over there and grab those in a second. We'll talk about polishing. This is going to polish, for the most part, exactly like the other metal clays you've used, right? The other silvers. It's softer than a copper or a bronze, but, you know, not as hard as a sterling, right? So it's going to polish like a fine silver, just like any of the other clays you've used. You're going to see a higher polish on it. It's softer on the outside. The metal will move as you polish it, okay? So you will actually be able, on this piece, you won't see it as much because we got so much dimension, but like on a flat piece, you can almost create a mirror, which you can't do on metal clay. You can create a shine on metal clay, right? But with this, you will almost be able to create a mirror. It's amazing. So you're going to do the same basic thing you do with everything else. You're going to use a soft brush, get down in the recesses, right? I'm not going to do a lot because this is her piece. I'm going to let her polish it however she likes to polish it, okay? But go down in the edges, all that good stuff. Give it a brush. Then use whatever methods you like. I tend to like the tumbler, right? So I brush as much as I want. If I'm going to patina, I don't brush that much because the kiln skill, the tooth, right, will hold the patina better. So I don't brush that much if I'm going to patina. If I'm not going to patina, I brush a ton. So I get down in the recesses and then I'll put it in the tumbler. Okay. Pin finishers work great. I use a sponge, like a sanding sponge, to sand the patina back off. And then I go in and I really polish it, you know? So yeah, there's 20 ways to polish. We all know that. You can use little machines. You can use big machines. You can use magnetic pin finishers. You can use regular pin finishers. You can use tumblers. You can use media in the tumblers versus just a steel stock. There's 100,000 ways to do it, right? It's going to perform well with any of those ways, okay? So the main thing I want to convey is that I want you to notice it when you do it. I want you to feel, because if you're like me and you work with your material enough, your material has a feel and you learn the feel of that material and you understand how it reacts and what it does as you work with it. The more you work with a particular material, the more you know it. Feel this material. See if you can see what I'm talking about.